I never want to confuse an intuitive feeling with a mental thought. Okay. And so I use kinesiology, the muscle test, to get a yes or a no. And I'll say, what I'm getting is an intuitive, yes or no. What I'm getting is my own thought, yes or no. So before I give, unless I'm feeling vibrationally, what happens is I get a vibration, Sally, and I get, especially if it's an afterlife communication, I get this presence on my left shoulder, and the love that comes from the other side is overwhelming.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. Sally and I are pleased to have you here. Today we have Nancy Mramor with us. Nancy has had some interesting experiences in her life, which I will leave it to her to tell you about. Nancy, welcome to Soul Explorers.
Thank you for inviting me, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with other people who know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is life after life.
We're really pleased to have you here to talk about your experiences and how you kind of came to the point that you're at now in your life and the work that you are currently doing. I know that you have a book out called Spiritual Fitness that tells us a little bit about that, but could you give us the short story of your journey to where you are right now?
Probably the most dramatic thing that happened as what prompted me to write Spiritual Fitness is that I had been a special educator at the time, and I was burning out working with children whose needs just really couldn't be met. And one of the parents of one of my students dragged me to what she called a weekend relaxation retreat that turned out to be a Jose Silva training, which is basically designed for distance to train people to do distance healing, which I did not know at the time. But after 4 days, 4 full days of training, you pair with someone who you don't know, and they give you the name of somebody in their life and their age. And you use the Silva technique to basically call them up on your screen and see them and diagnose what's going on with them physically, and then feed it back to the person who presented the case. And what happened was that it was 100% accurate, including comments that they had made to each other about the health of the person and so on. And so for me, that was like, okay, distance healing. I'm here, but I'm also there and I'm seeing her. And it's possible for all of us to do this. And it's also evidential for me that our spirit exists outside of our body.
So you're essentially saying you were doing remote viewing,
We were doing remote healing.
remote healing, but that encompasses remote viewing because you were there but not there.
As
So
we were remote viewing for the purpose of remote healing. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
correct. Okay.
So that started me off on a spiritual journey that took me everywhere. I studied absolutely everything along the spiritual realm. And one of the things that I started to experience was not only was I able to do some distance healing, I was able to sort of tune in different ways to different people, and my intuition really opened up. My ability to be intuitive and to pick up on people and just know what they needed, what they needed to hear. And sometimes that information would just be something I felt, and sometimes it would come from loved ones, actually. And so I began to really develop that ability in a very serious way and do a lot of traveling and a lot of studying. Actually, I would have to say that the one thing when I talk to people, the one thing that I tell them is, I don't know a lot of things for sure, but the one thing that I know for sure is that there's life after death.
If you don't know anything else for sure, that's the most important thing.
And that's what
And
I,
we were talking about this briefly before the interview, and that if people can lose that fear of extinction or death, because our media, everything plays it to the negative. And really, all those that communicate with us say there's nothing negative about it. It's expansion. It's a positive thing. But if we can get to that point where we don't just believe it, because believing it is a step, but we get to the point where we know, we've seen enough to say, okay, this is real. That changes your whole perspective on life, how you interact with people, what you put out, what you radiate to the world. All of that changes. And you're a much happier person.
that's absolutely true. And I know that one awareness has seen some people through the dark night of the soul. Just to know that nothing's going right, and I feel like I'm being engulfed in these problems, but that I know for sure, and that brings people out on the other side. And so that's been my life's devotion, really my career's devotion as a psychologist and as an author and as a teacher, as an instructor, because there's so many ways we can integrate this information into sort of standard kinds of teaching. So my goal, part of my life purpose, is to integrate spirituality and science and to bring those two things together for people and to explain sort of spiritual phenomena in a way that's very practical and applicable in their lives. And when I wrote Spiritual Fitness, it was published by Llewellyn Publishing, and they are an international publisher. They really did a wonderful job with the book. The book actually became, I've been writing it and I was stuck on the last chapter. And at that point in time, I developed an advanced phase of leukemia. Okay. I was sort of 10%, I had about a 10% chance of surviving. And I started the treatment, and I was, working with healers who were doing distance healing on me. And I was getting acupuncture, and I was getting energy work, and I was taking chemotherapy, and I was taking radiation, and I was in remission in 23 days. And the treatment was a 5-year treatment plan. So it works to bring spirituality and science together. So that gave me the last chapter of the book, which was okay, there are all these things you can do in your spiritual studies. You can use colors and you can use visualization. And then in the last chapter, I said, and this is how I used it to create a healing in my own life. And so the book did very well, and Llewellyn entered it in some sort of a competition for metaphysical books and spiritual books. And they entered my book in the category of bridging spirituality and science. Now, that same year, the Dalai Lama came out with a book on consciousness, and we both won the same award that year. And then in the exact same contest, his in the category of consciousness and mine spirituality and science. And Spiritual Fitness is really a basic book for people who are starting on this path and who want to follow it all the way through, but need a place to begin, need a place to sort of learn the basics.
When I was first finding myself on this journey of understanding as well, it was important to me that what I was experiencing could have a connection to science. I was raised, very educated with a father who had a science background, and I found that there's not conflict between the two. How do you describe that interconnection between science and spirituality? What's convincing for you?
Oh, I did an article for the Journal of Theology and Science, which kind of looks at what you're asking. And as you said, there is no separation. The separation is a little bit of a right brain, left brain separation. So it's the left brain that needs the proof. It needs to go to the medium and have the evidential mediumship, and it needs to, say, well, then maybe I'll believe it, because the brain has to be convinced. It's the right brain that says, oh, I feel this wonderful vibrational feeling when I'm around you, Sally, and it just feels wonderful. And that's the right brain that says, yeah, okay. So it's the validation, and we so much often talk in the group about validation, proof, and it's just the knowing. And I'm around a lot of people who are very scholarly and very academically oriented, and they'll study Buddhism and Hinduism, and they'll be experts on everything, spiritual, but they're not getting, they're not feeling, they're not allowing themselves to get the evidence, the evidential mediumship of just feeling it and experiencing it and getting the tap on the shoulder.
So they're more in their head with it, not their heart.
Yeah, they're more in their head, and they're less in their heart, less in their spirit, less in their heart, less allowing their spirit to lead their life. Because as you said, people, they're afraid of death. And it has to do a lot with the left brain. I need to know, I need to have control over it. It needs to be specific, I need to have a path. Where in the right brain just says, I'm going to go when it's my time to go and not before. And that's why when I developed leukemia, I said, I'm not supposed to go right now. This is not my time to go. So I just said, well, let's just get on this and get it taken care of.
Well, you seem to have had a knowing of that. I mean, inherent, that's the spirit, coming through, saying, "No, this is not your time." Now, I've always heard this. I can't verify it as a fact, but that the time of our leaving here is set when we come in. Not the how, but the when. We can take any different method to leave the planet, but the when is set. How do you feel about that statement?
I completely agree that it's set within a certain time frame. Yeah, and not sometimes maybe the minute, because I had an uncle who was supposed to have a knee replacement, and he didn't go because he was afraid that he was going to die during surgery. So the day of the scheduled surgery, he was in a car accident and died. So he knew that this was his time, and whether he couldn't run from it, he couldn't avoid it. It was going to happen. So that's a little bit of evidence for what you're saying.
Yes, and just the fact of that knowing should open us up to a wider, okay, there's something bigger going on here. That's one of the steps. It's like synchronicities and that kind of knowingness, and the interconnectedness with other people. I mean, this week alone, 3 times I've either called someone, "Oh, I was just about to call you. I was thinking of you," or they've called me and I've known who it is before I looked at the phone. And for no reason should I have known that. It was a random thing, but we're all interconnected. And it's like spirits kind of showing me how interconnected we are by these little synchronicities all the time. So,
And these are supposed to be increasing on the earth right now, as there's a lot of light coming from the higher realms to the earth right now to help us through some of the crisis that we're going through. And so all of our intuitive skills and abilities should increase right now. There
yeah.
should be a greater ease with using those tools, which is, I think, Gary, to your purpose is to let people know, that there's life after this life. The clients that I work with in my practice who fear death have tremendous anxiety to
Yes, of course.
live in fear. They don't live in the moment. They live.
So essentially, they're not living.
They're not. And those who know and those who do are just fine. Yeah, those who are accepting it, even those who are considerably advanced age. And, often I have found that I'm around some people maybe who have family who don't believe, and I've had family who aren't believers in the afterlife, and we always get a validation within a day that they go over, that they're over there. They tell us, "Oh my goodness, now I see the light. Now I know." And I had good friend of mine who's also an intuitive and a therapist, and her partner went over, and he wasn't a believer, and within a day he said to me, "Well, I'll be darned."
Sometimes it's a surprise.
Right, exactly. Well, crossed his arms and he said, "Well, I'll be darned." So and it's always, I find, much easier to make those connections in those first couple days. So if somebody, talks to me and wants to know what's going on, I can usually, because life is not terminal, it's not over. Everyone is still alive. They just don't have their bodies. And they can, especially before they completely make their transition into the afterlife, they can much more easily say, "Hey, I'm okay over here." And that's what people need to hear on this side, is they need to know that their loved ones are still here and that they're okay.
Tell us just a little bit about how you experience that communication. So it seems like you do get very clear confirmation that comes through to you. For you, is it a clear audience? Is it a knowing? How do you experience that?
So one of the things that I always do, because I never want to confuse my intuition with my mind. Gary, we were talking left and right brain. I never want to confuse an intuitive feeling with a mental thought. Okay. And so I use kinesiology, the muscle test, to get a yes or a no. Is and I'll say, what I'm getting is an intuitive, yes or no. What I'm getting is my own thought, yes or no. So before I give, unless I'm feeling vibrationally, what happens is I get a vibration, Sally, and I get, if especially if it's an afterlife communication, I get this presence on my left shoulder, and the love that comes from the other side is overwhelming. The degree of love that you can, and there's no mistaking what's going on when that happens. But when they come in on the left shoulder. They're coming, they're popping in here as we're speaking, and the intensity of the vibration and of the love and the height of the vibration tells me, okay, somebody wants to talk to somebody I'm in the room with, and then we get quiet. And it's hard for the sitters sometimes, the person that you're talking to know what to do with this. They start talking and they want to talk to this other person. And it's real important to keep the vibration, to keep the high vibration so that you can experience what they're telling you. And it can come as an image, it can come as a picture, it can come as a word, it can come as a feeling. It can come in almost any of the senses, in any of the five senses. But when I'm working with a patient and we're doing really, really deep work, sometimes going back to the womb or past life, my guides just work with me, and intuitively I say, well, if they're struggling through something, I can offer, hey, are you feeling that maybe this is going on here, or maybe that's going on, or maybe in the womb, did you have any reason to feel this or that? And so I'm offering the intuition, and it always, when it's coming from my guides, when it's coming from a higher place, it always hits right on, and it makes the work go 10 times faster and 10 times deeper than just, traditional talk therapy.
And I love that you use it as a tool in your process, that it's something that allows you to get to a deeper a knowing. Do you understand utilizing your intuition as a healing modality?
Yes. And when I first started to develop the ability, I was worried about it because, how do I bring this into a clinical practice, clinical work? And then I found Judy Orloff's book. She was a psychiatrist who was psychic, and that was just how it was. She was psychic, and she really struggled with it. And I was really inspired by her, and that's what allowed me. And what you said, I think, is really important. I may not schedule a reading with somebody, an intuitive reading, but it just gets worked into the work that you do, whether it's giving a class and sort of knowing what people need to hear while you're teaching and sort of changing up what you're going to do because of what you're sensing from the group, or whether you're just intuiting around what the client, is going through.
And I think it's really interesting too, because you have such a good connection to your own intuitive abilities and your own access to this sort of subtle information, that you can also then assist the people that you're working with for recognizing their own intuition and recognizing their own access to those things.
Yes,
A lot of times, I think people who are very sensitive to these things may go asking for help from professionals, but if they don't recognize these subtle skill sets that are very human in nature, they may write it off in ways that are not helpful.
yes. And I try to teach everyone I work with kinesiology because it really helps them develop intuition and understand what's an intuitive thought and what isn't. And there's nothing wrong with the intellectual thought, but kinesiology really makes a difference in people developing their own abilities. And I encourage them all to do it because I can't be with them all the time. They need to do it for themselves. And I appreciate your comment about that. Yeah.
Now, I've actually utilized on my spiritual path kinesiology and still use it sometimes. And one thing you said was yes or no answers, but it's really yes or not yes, because the universe doesn't really know no. It just responds with an affirmative or a not affirmative. But that was a distinction the teacher I learned it from taught.
Yeah.
What method do you use? I mean, there is the two-person method, or you can do the finger thing, or you can use a pendulum, I think. How do you access kinesiology?
Kinesiology, the least obtrusive, the simplest, and the fastest. And for me, my nervous system and I are that's so embedded in how I work that it works really well for me. Most people have trouble with the finger testing, and so I have them use their body as a pendulum.
Uh-huh.
Because, to have them stand up and say, my name is Ginger. And if their name is, see how your body sways, what direction. My name is George. If their name isn't George, see how their body sways, see how their body tells them when there's a yes or a no. And then they can use it on their own. And I encourage them not to wait till we get together to meet. I encourage them to make their own decisions by using their body kinesiology.
Sure. And actually the finger method is very simple once you get the hang of it. It's just a matter of clearing your mind so your own thoughts do not interfere with the answer given. Whether you like the answer or not, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I find it interesting that that's a method you use because I found it very effective. Um,
Very effective especially for people who are just learning, almost an essential tool,
mhm.
a really important one. And I use it a lot. I use it all the time. I use it to try to figure out what's going on when my cat is sick, you know, or even if I'm doing an oracle in the morning, for the day, pulling a card from an animal deck or something. And I shuffled and I'm not really sure. I'll kinesiology check. Do I need to shuffle again? Or is this the one? Is this it? Did I arrive on it? So it's your way of just communicating with your higher self.
Let me ask you a question really quick then, because I've had kind of mixed results for myself. How much does someone wanting an answer impact the answer that they receive? And is there a way to work around that?
You always put it out as a statement, never as a question. So if my chiropractor is doing kinesiology, he's checking, is it this, is it this, is it this, is it the shoulder, is it the hip, is it this bone or that bone? So it's just a yes, it's just sort of a statement of fact. this is the right, I pulled the right card for me today. And if I get a no, then I keep shuffling. It's just a simple, it has to be done as a statement. Gary, I'm glad you said that this can be learned, because a lot of people that I work with have a lot of trouble with the finger kinesiology. And as you said, of course, your mind has to be clear, but you also, Sally, to that effect, have to be certain that what you're saying that you're wanting to know and what you're thinking are the same. Because if you're thinking about one way about it and you're saying the request another way, it gets really confusing.
And be sure you want to know what you're asking, because sometimes there are some things we don't want or need to know.
And I have found that I don't get an answer in those cases.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I've had that occur too with no answer usually means you're not meant to know at this time. But I love the fact that you say make it a statement, because and maybe that's where I have fallen short in the past when I've had kind of mixed results, was I tend to ask it as a question. And I love the instruction to make it a statement.
Make it a statement. And if you don't get an answer, sometimes you don't need the answer, or sometimes it's just saying it's up to you. There's not
Yes.
a right answer. It's up. You have to do this one on your own.
Right.
Yeah, much like our own guides, they won't always give you, I mean, they will make suggestions, but they won't tell you what to do. And I was talking to a very, well, a Christian, um, recently, and they said, "Well, how do you know it's not evil spirits you're talking to?" And I said, "For one, they'll never tell you, do this, do that. If you hear that, go the other direction. But they will advise if you ask, and they will make suggestions, but they won't push you to do what they're suggesting. You know, they give you an option."
And sometimes it's just a gentle encouragement, and sometimes it's a stronger encouragement.
Sure.
I think Gary and I have shared strong encouragements that we've received in the past. When we've shared stories about that, because sometimes it's a loud suggestion. We'll put it that way.
Sometimes it's a hit on the head,
Yeah.
Yes.
not on the shoulder. Sometimes it's like, ouch. Ouch. Okay, I'm listening. Yeah. Yeah, you're not paying attention.
So, what are you working on currently? Where is your current work with both spirit and those who you help in other ways? Where is that taking you at the moment?
Couple of directions. One is just to do my own, intensify my own capacity to bring through the information for people so that I'm being as much of service as I can possibly be, and to be sort of an intermediary for that. On a practical level, over the years, I've conducted a lot of study groups through the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which are about bridging spirituality and science. And so they get grants from the National Institute of Health to test distance healing. They get the money to put the science behind what we know, for the people that like to have the science. And so I've been away from that for a while, and I'm picking up a new one now. I'm starting a new IONS group, Institute of Noetic Sciences group, with someone that I was connected with I'm from Pittsburgh, and she's from Seattle. And so we're going to do this together. And she actually is working with Gary, telepathic tapes. What do they call them? Telepathy tapes. She is writing a book about her experience with actual autistic children.
Is this Dr. Diane?
No, this is her book is just coming out. It's Katie Eastman, Dr. Katie Eastman,
Okay.
and she didn't know what to call it. She didn't have the name for it. And once we started talking about, what the work that we do, she said, "Oh my God, that's it." And she's been reviewing the telepathy tapes because she works with autistic kids. and she's always known they're telepathic, and so she's real interested in kind of some of the same things that we are.
Gary
Sort
and I have found the telepathy tapes to be so fascinating and so validating for even our own experiences that I think that this is a thing that's going to shift the worldview on not only what these children are capable of, but what we're capable of.
once we get out of the way, and
Yeah.
get, once we're able to get ourselves in that state where, where we can be that, be consciousness.
Yeah. So tell anybody who, because we haven't actually talked about the telepathy tapes on our program before, tell anybody who's not familiar with them a little bit about it and how then your work is going to lean into that information.
Well, the telepathy tapes are they're very typical of this mission of ions to bring spirituality and science together. So when they found that autistic children seemed to be knowing what other people were thinking, they were knowing things that weren't said or weren't presented in a visible way. um, they started to look at like, well, maybe we can look at this and what's happening with these autistic kids, and maybe we can see how this works, in a better way. And so they started out with a very simple experiment where they blindfolded the children and they put different colored popsicle sticks in piles. And then they would give the child a popsicle stick, and without knowing anything, he would put the stick in the right colored pile. Now, how did he know that? This is the same type of experiment they do on psychics to see if the psychic is really, psychic. Well, here's a bunch of shapes, and we're going to give you one, and you have to figure out, where the match is. And almost without fail, the kids were able to do it. And so they extended the experiments a little bit. And, the mothers and the sons seemed to have a telepathy. And so the mom would maybe type something in on a calculator and ask him what the answer was, the child what the answer was, and he could tell her just because of what she was thinking, what she was intuiting. And so it came to be understood. And these children don't have much body awareness. So they are just pure consciousness. And they had to be taught, this is your hand. You have a hand. So they were not limited by their bodies, all the things that we get up and we have to do every day, to be a physical being in the world. They don't have that limitation. And so, Sally, I think you're right. I think the understandings that this research is going to bring to us, if people accept it, which is always the case, if they accept it, it could be life altering. And we just have to understand that everybody learns in their own time and accepts, and change is, first of all, you present the information and let them sit with it for a while before they can say, well, maybe, maybe this is true, and get to a real understanding, unless they have like one of those hit you over the head experiences like I had with the distance healing.
I also think this is part of the paradigm shift that we're in now. Energetically, what's happening on our planet, that this information is becoming more and more prevalent, more and more revealed to the public as a whole. Whereas some of these things were happening before and nobody heard about it. So certainly our technology, everything has fallen into place for this unfolding process that is part of um, the transition that I think the planet is going through and human beings.
Yes, it's now available. The information is now available. It's
Yeah.
accepted. And there are more and more people who are willing to make it available and accessible.
I was really moved by the one child who said, "What we are, you are becoming. You're becoming what we are. Um, this is your future as a species. To be able to telepathically communicate, because my understanding is on the other side, that's how people communicate. They don't verbalize.
And it's actually my understanding that that was how we communicated. That's what we sort of look at as the origin of humanity on the planet of Atlantis. There wasn't, it was just, telepathic. There wasn't any need for, other types of communication.
Well, the verbal language is difficult to express clearly always in verbal language and get your point across. Whereas telepathically, when you receive that information, you're not only getting the content, but you're getting images, pictures, everything that tells the whole story. Whereas when somebody's talking to you, you're only getting their perspective in a verbal manner.
Makes me think of a couple of things. One is when you're getting that information, it makes it hard to convey it to someone.
Right.
It's hard to explain it, kind of have to put it together. And because it comes in that way, it's not always easy for the receiver of the information to understand it, because what you're presenting is something that's kind of etheric and not really tangible often. And so it would be nice to just be merged as consciousness, be able to just convey things much more easily. I hope we're getting there. I think, that's the point. The point is that we should be getting there.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, you talked about timing, and certainly technology, even with regard to the people involved with the telepathy tapes, it couldn't have happened at a different time, because in the past people were sort of separated and more isolated. And so maybe they were convinced by the things that they were experiencing, but they had no way of finding other people who were experiencing the same things. And now that's not a problem anymore. We can have programs like this where we can talk about the many ways that you can connect to spirit or be convinced of an afterlife. And the same thing with these children who were telepathic by nature, just by their nature. Their parents maybe knew it for a long time before they found other people who were having similar experiences.
And I think it's important, Sally, what you're saying is really important, because people need a community of other people who know the same thing that they know. And that's why, we have the Afterlife Book Group. This is why we have Institute of Noetic Sciences study groups. People want to come together with other people who can speak this same kind of language and have this same kind of understanding and get support to take this out, become light bearers, and bring this information to people who are ready to hear it at whatever level they're ready to hear it, and whatever time they're ready to hear it. Yeah.
Now, just for if anyone is not familiar, ions, this was started by Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, because he had experiences in space that he couldn't reconcile, and he began to investigate. He felt, all I will call it is an expansion when he was in space. So, and you've also done work with another organization that has a similar acronym, which is IANDS, right? IANDS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, or have you not?
A member of it. But I have, I'm certified in past life regression. And no, but I'm not a member of that. I'm a member of EMDRIA, which some of the letters might have gotten confused, which is EMDR, which is a mind, body, spirit treatment for trauma,
Yeah,
which is spiritually based.
which can also put you in contact with your loved ones beyond the veil, if I'm correct in my memory on that. Isn't it a tapping method?
I use a technique called neuro-emotional technique. And when you are using the technique, and do we have time for a little story?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I had studied neuroemotional technique, which it involves kinesiology and tapping and so on. And it was very, very new because it's not anything like traditional psychotherapy. And I was determined that I was going to use this with my patients, but I wanted to take the course again, just to really feel that I was really grounded in it. And that year, spiritual fitness had been picked up for a national book tour with the Nursing Oncology Society, with other authors who were writing books to support cancer patients. And we had gone to Denver and Dallas and some other cities. And while I was on the plane going to San Francisco, or San Diego. That was a San Diego tour. I made this commitment to the universe, and I was out there in the universe on a plane, so to speak. I wasn't grounded. And I said, as soon as I get home, I'm going to find out where the next training is anywhere in the world, and I'm going to go and take it, and I'm going to repeat the course, and I'm going to start using this because the trainings were all over the world. And so I'm on the plane, and I get to San Diego, and there's a 3 hour time difference, as we know. And I wake up to take my walk, and my body thinks it's 8 o'clock, but it's really 5 o'clock there. And I'm walking around in the dark on this 5 acre campus. And I came to a bulletin board. And for some reason, I stopped to read the bulletin board in the dark. And it said that there was a training that weekend in San Diego for neuroemotional technique. So I said, well, maybe when daylight comes, I'll be able to find the training, and maybe I can piggyback on my trip here and maybe do some of the review course. So daylight comes and I find the training, and the training is at the convention center where I am, in the building where I'm giving my talk, in the room across the hall.
There are no coincidences.
And I said, oh, I think I'm supposed to be doing this. And of course, I walked in and I was still dazed and confused. And I said, I'm not registered, but I think I should be. And they said, oh, yeah, you're reviewing. You can go, you can do your lecture, you can back us, you're just reviewing. And as I'm standing in the back of the room, the person who developed the technique walked over to me and said, I think I'm supposed to talk to you. He was the founder of the technique. And so we talked, and he said, you're talking to cancer patients. Why don't you tell them about using energy work to help get rid of some of the baggage that may be contributing to their illness? And so I did. And then what happened was we collected email addresses of people who were interested from all over the world. And we got them hooked up with practitioners in their hometowns to help with healing. And after that, I did a few more of these lectures in different cities and continued to talk about, this is a technique that can help you release some of the emotional baggage from the body, help with the healing. And we connected them with practitioners all over the world who could help them with their own healing.
You bring up a really interesting topic to me because I've done a little research into this myself. How do you understand that mind body connection and how an emotional state or mental state may contribute to manifesting a very physical illness?
Wow. Okay.
It's a big question.
Oh, yeah, and let me just add to that because talk about synchronicity and connectedness. My question was if we are keeping our vibration high, if we are living a positive kind of life, loving, do you feel that has a huge effect on how our body functions and how our physical health? So we're essentially asking the same question. I had that in my head before you asked that. So just add that to it.
So you're saying, does staying in that kind of a compassionate state help us with our own healing and prevent illness? And it certainly does, because we are vibration. All of the cells are are vibrating to something. And if we're telling ourselves, "Oh no, my mother had diabetes, I'm going to get diabetes," the cells in the body respond to that. And Bruce Lipton really kicked off a lot of good research about exactly that. If we tell our bodies we're going to get this genetically imposed illness, then you're attracting it. You're telling your body, get this illness. But if you tell your body, no, I'm not going to get that. My mother had that, but that's not going to happen to me. The sheath around the DNA actually protects the DNA from becoming activated and keeps you from getting the disease.
Mhm.
Yes. To say yes.
Here's an interesting thing that I've noticed, and I've noticed it. It's come up more than once, where a researcher is studying a rare type of disease. It's not contagious, but it only crops up in one in so many hundreds of thousands of people, and they end up getting it. the researcher ends up coming down with the disease that they have been so focused on. So that's kind of a clue. That's a key to the fact that our thoughts are things. And, I so often hear people, well, I never have any luck. I'll probably end up getting sick if I go to this. And yeah, they do. Um, or I never win the lottery, and they don't. So, um, but
I'm good at all of those things.
if you totally reinforce that, it's
Yeah.
energetic, and
Energetic. And to Sally's question, how do we increase that interaction? Very early in my studies and my career, I picked up a copy of Norman Shealy's work, 90 Days to Self-Health. And he explains to you how you train your body to listen to your mind. And it's out of print, I think, but you can still find them. You can still find it around. It's a wonderful book to train yourself, to tell your right hand, my right hand is warm, and work with that until you can get your right hand to be warm. And then my right hand is heavy and warm. And then you continue throughout the body until you've got this interaction set up between you and your body where you can tell your body what you want. One of the things that happened and why I reached a 23-day remission was because I was sitting and drawing little healthy cells and using the colored pencils. And I was telling my body, this is how many you need to be in remission, the number, and drawing the cells all day long. And so that was just a part of the healing process, but it was an important one to your point that we have to talk to our bodies. They listen, they hear everything, they hear every word we say.
Oh, I'm the worst for saying I'm not lucky, and I don't play the lottery. Gary, on the other hand, he knows when to play. But yes, self-talk is so much of our experience, isn't it? And that can all the way down to the cellular level, it seems.
I remember I used to make the observation that in Pittsburgh, we had the Great Flood of Pittsburgh on St. Patrick's Day, and we had the Great Fire in Pittsburgh on St. Patrick's Day. And I, talk about that in terms of Pittsburgh history. And I was diagnosed with ALL on St. Patrick's Day because I had determined that that was an unlucky day, in this hometown. So it's really interesting how subtle that can be. Really be careful of our words. And to the best of my understanding, if we say something or think something and we catch it, there's a certain time frame between which it released and it actually manifests. We can pull it back, so that we're teaching ourselves all the time, how to think and what to say and how to stay in the light. And if you find yourself pulled away from it, you're familiar with the Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. You can realign yourself very quickly by saying, "Oh, I really got into my ego in that situation, and I really got into a verbal altercation, and I was not living from my highest self." And then you realign, and it can be done very quickly.
this it takes me back. I'm sort of going off on a tangent here, but I was taking some psychic classes in the early '80s, and I remember the teacher having us, if something was sticking with you that you didn't really want there, to picture it and blow it up. Just blow it up. One person in the class misunderstood the instructions, so she was making it bigger and couldn't figure out why things were getting worse and worse and worse. She was enlarging the picture, instead of exploding the picture.
That's actually a hypnosis technique where if you have ruminating thoughts, you picture it and you see it dissolve. You use like a slingshot, and you throw a slingshot at it and you dissolve it.
Yeah, yeah. All these techniques, they're valuable. They're useful, and I really am feeling more and more that we are in a intense transitional period, and I'm seeing it in my own world. And we all have our own little world, and then we have this sort of agreed upon world that we create. But I'm seeing things changing and a quickening, so to speak, of energy. I think in lieu of that, negative things will manifest quicker under the new dynamics as well. This just came to me. The, they'll manifest quicker if we don't tend to them and blow them up, explode them. Nancy, are you offering any classes to the public at this point in time that are along these lines? Is that something you do?
I developed an online course a couple of years ago, but it just either had to be renewed or released, and I released it. So it's not there now. But people can I do what's called spiritual fitness coaching. So if somebody is interested in having that, it's a four-part. We start with a four-part training, and it is not psychotherapy, so it's different from psychotherapy. But if I am working with a person in person, we can also do energy work to support
Uh,
the.
And so how do people reach you to find out more about this?
The best thing, my website is www.realconsciousliving.com, and there's a contact form in there, and they can
Okay. And
send.
that's how people can find you. Well, this has been a delightful conversation. I've known you for a little while, but not very closely, but energetically had been wanting to do this for some time. And I'm glad we finally could settle on a time to bring you on. Is there any parting comments you would like to give for our audience today?
The quote that I have in my email is at the end of my email messages. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So anything that anyone is experiencing in the outer world, they need to kind of look at, how am I putting that out? How am I projecting it? Because what we're attracting is what we're, as you talked about, what you're putting your attention on. And it can be very subconscious. And that's why we have to look around and say, what do I see here? And bring it to consciousness, because it's how we're creating our own lives.
Beautiful.
Nancy, thank you. Yes, it's been a fascinating conversation. We
Thank you.
appreciate your skill sets and your wisdom and your experiences, and the stories that you share will hopefully help others to realize that they can have these connections as well.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you so much. Namaste for all of this beautiful connection.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.